Good evening all and welcome. As voted for by you, we have a collection of black-eyed kid stories for your listening pleasure. We haven't done this in a very long time as these stories are becoming even more rare and more scarce. So this might be the next one for a long while, so I hope you enjoy. Before we jump in though, don't forget that we've got our Patreon promo running still, and you can find the link to get stickers, a letter from me, and all the exclusive content that you find on Patreon at the top of the description. But for now, it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. This happened to me and my boss, who also happens to be my stepdad, just last night. We are a courier service based in the UK. To start with, we had a little dark and secluded car park in a village in Dorset called Birdport to spend the night in the van ready for an early arrival on our first job in the morning. We had done the usual, a cigarette, coffee, then climbed into our bunks and got ready to sleep. It was around 3 AM and we hear a tap 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 on the passenger side window, but I shook it off presuming it was a tree branch and the wind, and rolled over in my slumber. But there was another tap, followed by a cry, the plea of a child. "Please help, we're lost. Can you help us?" The voice sounded to be that of an 8 or 9-year-old girl. I looked up and wasn't instantly concerned for myself, but concerned about the child in question being out at that time in the morning, considering it was around 3:10 AM. As I looked towards the window, I saw a young girl wearing a dark grey hoodie, standing at the side of the van with her head pointed down towards the floor. "Can we use your phone? We're lost." But that didn't seem to come from the girl I could see. I rubbed my eyes, presuming I was dreaming, and turned to my boss to see he was wide awake, his gaze fixated on his side window. Now let me tell you something about my boss, Trevor. He is the most skeptical person I know. He doesn't believe in anything paranormal, as he's a true believer in seeing is believing. I realized something was wrong with how he was acting, and I've never seen him look or even seem scared in the whole 3 years I've known him. So I looked up and saw another young girl, the one who was talking to us. "We need to use your phone. Let us use your phone." My first reaction was to ask him why you haven't answered. But as I was about to say this, he shook his head and stared at the young girl. I looked again, but boy do I wish I hadn't. Her eyes, they were, well, nothing, just black holes of pure, absolute emptiness. Not the eyes a little girl or anyone would bestow. I turned to look at the girl on my side of the van, and now she was looking at me with the exact same dark, empty eyes, but bearing a grin that made my blood run cold. You know the type of feeling when you get that cold shiver through your spine and it curls up to your toes? I noticed that she was shaking, meanwhile tapping. "Let us use your phone. Let us call our parents." All of this happened within about 90 seconds. I took a minute just to try and convince myself this wasn't actually happening, but the tapping continued, as did the "let us use your phone," but it was now more of a command. Just as I was about to shout, "No, go away," in the most stern way I could, the girl who was talking whistled, and the girl on my side of the van changed. Not physically, but she started growing, almost barking while running back and forth the length of the van. Then they turned around and walked away. I know most people won't believe me, but I've never had an experience like this before, and hope to God to never have one again. This must have happened at least 10 years ago now. Let me give you some context. Back then, I worked at a cinema, and our cinema usually held these special midnight screenings for avid moviegoers who simply couldn't wait till the next night for a particular movie to come out. We only did it for ones that we knew would bring in an audience and, of course, money. I happened to be one of those unfortunate few who was drafted in the roster to be in attendance that night, not only to make sure the movie went well and stand behind the candy counter, but to clean up when everyone had left. So I knew I wasn't going to be getting home until at least 3:34 a.m. The making of a great night. I can't remember which film in question was actually playing, but I knew it was a Marvel one, as those tended to rack up the dollars which we needed to stay open, and as a small independent cinema, it was vital for my boss. So anyway, let me take you back. The movie had just ended and everyone was making their way out. I remember feeling like absolute crap and wanting nothing more than to go home and pass out, as I was being sustained on coffee and sugar, a combination I do not recommend when still at work. Everyone had left the building, and I went to get my leaf blower to start blowing all the popcorn out of all the aisles. It's a fun job at first, but gets boring quite quickly. I remember seeing a huge spill of Coke all over the floor, and the thing with Coke is it gets very sticky if you leave it long enough. That was going to be fun later, as I was the one in charge of cleaning this particular theatre. We were working a skeleton crew because my boss didn't want more people than necessary to have to cope with being up that late. As I was cleaning up, I hear one of my co-workers close the front door and shout to me that everyone has left, standard procedure. That person then does a sweep of the entire facility to make sure that no one has been left behind or is hiding. You'd be surprised how many people choose to do this, thinking they can, well, I'm not entirely sure, stay a night in a cinema or stay a night in the cinema to then wake up the next morning and watch loads of movies for free. I heard that it does happen in some places. Anyway, I was just cleaning up when I needed to go grab a mop, and as I went to the storage cupboard to grab it, I heard a tap on the recently closed door. I look over and see a small girl of around 10 in a dark hoodie staring at me through the door. Now it was quite dark and I couldn't see her all that well because of the glare and the reflection from the inside. So I shout over to her, "We're closed, honey, go be with your parents." She doesn't say a word, but continues tapping with her fingernail on the door. I look over to her and say, "If you've left something, I'm afraid you're going to have to get it tomorrow. I haven't found anything yet and I'm still doing the cleaning." At this point, my co-worker walks in, so I tell him to deal with the girl, grab my mop, and go over to deal with that spilled Coke. Great. This is going to be a fun night. After about 10 minutes, and satisfied with my work, the theatre being as clean as it's going to get, I start making my way to put the mop back and hopefully just do my last few checks before I can leave for the night. I go and look around for my co-worker and he's no longer there, but I do see the girl is just idly standing and staring in the doorway. I tell myself that I'm busy and that I don't have time for this girl, but then I realize it's like 3 a.m. What the hell is a little girl doing here? I assumed that her family must have told her to go grab whatever it was that she'd left behind, but nothing was in the theatre. I look up at the girl and shout to her, "Is there anything you left? I just cleaned the theatre, I couldn't find anything." But there's no reply. I try and look at her, but there's something wrong with her eyes, I can't really tell. It's almost like I can't see them. Weird. I assume it's because of the glare of the inside lights and the pure darkness from the outside. She taps on the window again just as I turn around to put away the mop. "Please help me." I turn over to her. "What's wrong, honey? What do you need?" "Please let me in. It's cold." Now that wasn't true. It was a particularly warm night if I remember correctly, which then made me wonder why the hell she was wearing a hoodie. I certainly wouldn't be. I can't do that. We're closed. But if you need or have forgotten anything, you can come back tomorrow, okay? Why don't you go find your parents, yeah? I was met with silence again. I put the mop away, and as I do so and close the door, she's gone. Great, I think to myself. She's gone. I can finally finish everything up and go. I start doing the final checks, and just as I'm turning some lights off, I hear a sob. It's my coworker. Darren? Darren, what the hell are you doing? Darren was on the floor of the candy counter. I hadn't actually noticed him before, whimpering slightly. I asked him what's wrong, and he said, the little girl, there's something wrong with her. He babbled. I didn't even understand what he was saying. So I picked him up, told him that she's gone, and to not be afraid of a little girl. We grab our bags, and just as we're about to leave through the staff fire exit, do we hear another tapping on the door, this time more pronounced. I see the little girl again. I see the street light from this angle illuminating behind her, and I tell her one more time, "Sorry honey, we're closed, we're going now." She looks at me, tilting her head, and as I flip off the light switch, I see no eyes. There's just a jet blackness where her eyes should be. I stare intently for a moment at this girl, without saying a word. My coworker grabs me by the arm and tugs. I take one look back to see this girl still standing there at the window. I try and tell him that we should probably go around or call the police to tell them that there's a girl there, but he isn't having any of it. Hushes me and says, "There's something wrong with that child." And we leave through the door. I live in this town, so I came on a bicycle. He came in a car. I jump on my bike and cycle as fast as I've ever cycled before. Unsettling feeling looming in my stomach. I knew something was up with that child. I just didn't know what. A few months pass, and I hadn't seen the child since. But I get talking with some friends at the bar, and one of them tells me about a story that they heard about a child with black eyes. As he's telling the story, I slowly start to fill with a greater sense of dread, as I realize what he's saying is something that happened to me. Not the same, of course, but a child with dark eyes asking to be let in. It sounds cliche. I just thought the girl was lost or wanted something from the cinema. Hell, she could have been homeless, I don't know. I try to rationalize everything, as I'm a complete skeptic. But my heart definitely skipped a few beats as he recounted the story that he had heard. I didn't choose to volunteer what I had seen at the time, and my coworker Daryl had actually left employment since then, so he couldn't validate for me. I just kept quiet and pretended to myself like whatever happened hadn't happened. I don't know if his story was true or not. All that I know is what I saw that night, and I really hope to never encounter it again. The story happened earlier this year, Thanksgiving 2015. Like any holiday, there were lots of neighbors hosting parties with their families, and random kids running around and playing outside, which I guess is one of the reasons I was foolish as I was that day. The sun was going down, and I was home alone watching TV and eating some turkey when I heard a knock at the door. I looked at the clock, and it was almost 7:30. Thinking it was one of my neighbors, I swung the door open without even thinking, and there stood two kids. One of them was a little boy with a baseball cap on and blue jeans and a jersey, and the other one was younger and shorter with no cap and looking towards the floor. I looked down at them and asked if they needed anything, and the older boy chirped, "Yes, we need to come in and get our baseball from your yard." As soon as he said that, a chill went down my spine. I had a horrible feeling that I should not let these boys in. I looked at him, studying his face, and in the back of my head, I knew something was wrong but couldn't quite place it. He must have noticed my hesitation because he exclaimed, "Come on, ma'am, we just want our ball back." And that's when I realized this child had no whites in his eyes. I was kind of shocked and flabbergasted. At first I thought they were black contact lenses, and I looked over at his brother and noticed he had the same eyes. My face must have given it away, because as soon as I looked to the leader, his eyes filled with hatred, and his smile turned to an evil smirk. I swear he stood taller and more confident, staring into my eyes with that smile, and hinted that he knew what I was thinking. From that moment, the atmosphere changed from what I perceived to be the beginning of an encounter as two normal and innocent boys standing in front of me, wanting their ball back, to two inhuman beings, wanting to invade my home and create havoc on my life. I stared at him. The smaller boy stood firmly and confidently on 2 feet as he got taller. He also stared. After about 30 seconds of staring, the smaller boy broke the silence. "Come on, ma'am. Just let us in." The way they said it, I could tell something changed in him because he spoke with so much conviction in his voice. I stared at him and he smirked. All-knowingly, I didn't know what to say. In my head, I wanted to scream and call them out, tell them they were demons from another world and to get off my porch, but at the same time, I began to wonder about my safety. If I did that, it would only be worse for me. I mean, what if, instead of just asking to come in, they force their way into my life? What if they get violent? I thought to myself, this charade we're playing by pretending this isn't what it is, if I don't play this game, it could be detrimental to my own health and well-being. I made the decision to keep playing and looked at the smaller of the two beings and said, "Yeah, I'll get it for you." I grabbed the door and slammed it in their face and began walking. Turned on all the lights, sat on my couch with my feet pulled up to my chin, and began to shake and rock back and forth and listen. But I heard nothing. No laughter outside, no children playing, no shuffling at my door, no further knocks, no anything. The world fell at a standstill, and I sat there silently in the fetal position, and then heard a slow knock at my door. I stopped rocking and stood still, listening intently for another knock. I didn't know what to do. I stared at the door and listened as another knock came through, but I refused to get up. My body was stiff and my arms so tightly wrapped around my legs I could feel the veins in my arms pumping blood. And the slow knock continued for at least 2 minutes, followed by silence so ear-piercing I wondered if I'd lost my hearing. The entire night went by, and I sat in my living room not knowing what to do. I don't know when I dozed off, but I woke up at around 2 a.m, and the lights were off in my house. The TV screen that was once on Comedy Central now filled with black and white static. I don't know how, but I think something made its way into my home. I got married too young at 21 and divorced when I was 23. A few months went by and I started having these nightmares. Long story short, a girl in a white dress with brown matted hair with leaves and dirt walks into my house, tracking muddy footprints. She stops and stares at the attic stairs, which are now down for some reason. I ask her why she's there. She screams and the whole house crumbles. I never saw her face. I had this nightmare almost every night for 3 months. And when I say every night, I mean probably 95% of the time. For some reason, I started sleeping in my living room as opposed to my bedroom. I just wasn't very comfortable there. So I'm sleeping on the couch one night and wake up at 2 a.m. I check my phone and see I have a text from a friend and respond. Important because it verifies I was awake. I start getting very uncomfortable, and then I heard a knock at my door. I walk around and peek out the window and there's a girl there. I can't see anything other than her white hoodie, which is up, and long dark hair coming out of it. She knocks, then knocks again. Not urgently or anything, but she didn't appear intent on leaving. So stupidly in retrospect, looking back on it as a 34-year-old, I crack the door open. In a quiet voice, she asks if she can use my cell. I still can't really see her face because my porch light was out, and I'd been putting off changing the bulb for no reason at all. I ask if everything's okay, and she just repeats that she needs to use the phone. Again, against my better judgment, I put my cell phone to the dial screen and hand it to her. I see her hit a few things and then puts her phone to the ear. As the screen lights up to give me a better view of her face, she was younger, like 18 to 22, plain, not really particularly distinguishable in any way. She waits for a minute and then says, "Hey, I need help. I need your help. Yeah, okay." Then hands me the phone again. So I look at my phone and it's still on the dial screen. Something felt weird to me. So I click over to recent calls and she hadn't called anyone. When I looked up, she was gone. Not quite vanished, but way, way down the street, further than anyone should have been able to cover in that tiny time frame. At that moment, the nightmares stopped. Potentially related, 2 months later, I got a call from a friend late at night, maybe around 10 p.m. They invited me over for a beer. I wasn't doing anything, so I did. I got back around 1 a.m. and my house had been broken into, like totally trashed, with a bunch of valuables gone. Certainly didn't think anything to do with it, but I sometimes wonder if that girl was casing my house that night. It's the only correlation I can make between the dream stopping and the real-world explanations for that weird experience. The whole thing was just super sketchy. I'm normally pretty logical about seeing weird stuff. I work nights and go long periods of time without sleeping, so my mind playing tricks on me isn't that unusual. But this happened in broad daylight with other people around, and it has left me completely confused. I was repairing a condenser in a very standard-looking suburban neighborhood. Directly across the street was a mother playing in her driveway with her toddler, pushing him around in one of those plastic cars. I was walking back to my work van around the side of the house when I hear a shriek, like a noise that you would hear and know something is being heard. I took a quick few steps to clear the corner of the house and see what was happening. Mother across the street didn't seem to hear or care. Then I heard it again, but being from the side of the house, I could pinpoint a little better. My head snapped to the house directly to the right of the one the mother was in front of, and I saw a small child staring directly at me with its mouth open and eyes. They seemed to be completely black all the way around the eye socket. I looked at the mother. Sure, she had to at least notice or hear the commotion, but she didn't. The thing waved, not like in a come here motion, but more so an acknowledging its awareness of me. I walked slowly back to the condenser and hid for maybe 5 minutes. When I came back around, it was gone, and the mother had carried on like nothing had happened. I had no explanation for what happened and still don't. I went home and began to tell my girlfriend what had happened, and she told me about the black-eyed children. I don't know what I saw that day, but there was something so deeply unsettling about the entire situation. It was just my average night of passing out in front of the TV. It was blaringly hot in the summer, and I needed my AC on pretty much all night, otherwise I would roast alive in my bed. This particular night, I had the AC turned on, and at around 1 a.m. when I woke up from my slumber in front of the TV, I groggingly turned my TV off, turned off the AC and the lights, and dragged myself up the stairs to my bed. I didn't brush the teeth, but instead threw my tattered body onto the bed and passed out immediately. The aircon was blowing right in my face, and I was enjoying the cool sensation overtake me. Just as I had drifted off into sleep, the aircon suddenly turned off. I look up. The little light with the temperature number has suddenly come off. I don't know if anyone uses it other than me, but I like to keep mine on, to have a very dim light and perception of what's around me at night. But for some reason the unit had turned off. I was very tired, but I was more hot than tired, so I rolled around until I found the remote, and after smashing the buttons and getting no reply, I looked over at my phone, which was connected to the charger next to my bed. It was off too. Huh, maybe the power went out. Now, there have been a few instances where, for whatever reason, my house has the power go out. All that I have to do is flip the switch and it comes back on. But of course, it could also be a general problem. I look out my window and see my neighbor's light is off, but it could just be they're asleep. So I walk down the stairs, exhausted and hot, and try and find the switch. When I flip it, to my dismay, no electricity comes back on. There is actually an additional safety switch outside that can sometimes be triggered, so I make my way out and have a little poke around to see if it does anything. It doesn't. Just as I'm about to turn around and head back to my house, at the gate of my property, I see two people walking by. I assume they're my neighbors, but have never seen them before, and call out to them, "Hey, did your power go out too?" The neighbors slowly turn to me. It was a boy of about 20, I'd say, and a younger child with him, of around 14. They look over to me with only the moon illuminating the area. And as I asked them again, because I felt like they hadn't heard me properly if the power had gone out, they just stare blankly at me. There was something off about their stare. I couldn't quite put my finger on it. "Hey guys, did your power go out too?" They stand there in sort of stunned silence, not saying a word. At this moment, awkwardness and general fear crept over me, and I stare at them in silence for a few seconds that felt like an eternity. "Alright then lads, well thank you. I'm gonna go back to bed." I slowly start making my way to my door, and just as I'm about to open it, do I hear them say, "Hold on." There was something about the tone, something about the way he said that, "hold on." I can't quite put my finger on it, but it gave me goosebumps, and I got a tingle all the way up my spine. I slowly turn around, and they're now staring at me from the other side of the street. "Yes? Can you help us? We're lost and need to use your phone." "Oh, sorry guys. My phone actually is dead. I don't have a charger working right now because of the lack of power, but hopefully you can find some way to contact whoever it is you need to," I say. My words came out almost forcefully, as even talking to these people seemed to really put me on edge. As I said that, I noticed that my hands were lightly shaking, so I wished them good night, go in and close my door, and lock it with the deadbolt, which is something I don't often do ever, even though my dad insisted I put it in. I slowly make my way up the stairs. Halfway up, there is a small window that lets you see out in front of the house, and as I do just that, I peek my eyes out and stare directly at these guys. The thing is though, they're staring right back at me, almost like they can see me, in the darkness and the limited illumination provided by the moonlight. They stare straight at me, and while focusing and paying more attention, I notice there's something off. It would appear that their eyes were completely black. I was tired, told myself I was exhausted, and chalked it up to there being not enough light. Crawled up to my bed and had the worst night's sleep I had for ages. The electricity didn't actually come back until midday the next day. That was bad. I never really thought much about my experience until reading online and finding out other people had seen these guys as well. They call them the black-eyed kids. Well, the older one wasn't a kid, but the young one, perhaps, 14 or so. Even so, they didn't ask to be let in, but it still leaves me with a deeply unsettling feeling. What did I witness that night? All that I know is that I don't want to see them again, if it's all the same. I used to work at an all-night gas station. We were conveniently situated about 10 miles between two quite large towns and saw a heavy amount of traffic even at night. That night, I was just sitting behind the counter on my phone waiting for something interesting to happen or a customer. I actually hadn't had anyone come for about the last half an hour, which at 3 AM is to be expected. Just as I'm blitzing through this Candy Crush level, does something pique my interest on the monitor above my head. We have security cameras pointed at almost every conceivable angle around the gas station, because we've had incidences in the past where people have come with firearms to steal the money from the cash register and items of convenience from the store itself. So, as I look up, I see what appears to be someone lumbering towards the gas station from the main road. It was quite dark, so I couldn't make them out clearly, but assumed that whoever they were walking towards us for a snack or whatever. I didn't pay it much mind. I knew they were going to eventually come into this store, so I kept doing my level and waited until that happened. About 5 minutes passed and no one had arrived. Weird, I thought, so I look up at the monitor again. I see them. It appears that they're standing right outside the convenience store, staring in through the window. Instinctually, I look up to the window where they allegedly are, but see nothing. For a moment, I do a triple take, looking up at the screen, down at the window, up at the screen, down at the window, and again. My mind can't make sense of something. I'm clearly looking at a guy wearing a hoodie, standing there, looking in on the store, but when I look in the exact spot where he should be, there's no one there. At this point, I stand up and stand on my chair. With the sleeve of my uniform, I try and wipe the screen, assuming it must be a smudge. But there's nothing. The closer I look, the more I can see the pixels lightly move from left to right. It's definitely a person. I just about crap a brick. There's me, staring into the screen, looking at something that I can't see with my own naked eye. I look over at the exact spot where they should be, right next to the grit as it happens, which I can see from this window, and see absolutely nothing. My heart is now pounding out of my chest. What the hell is going on here? Is this a joke set up by one of my co-workers? Had someone hacked into the cameras and overlaid this dude? I thought I was going to lose my mind. So I call my mum. Even though it's early in the morning, she knows that I can call her. In fact, she told me to call her if ever anything presents itself, so she knows her daughter's safe. I call her and she answers the phone. I didn't want to tell her. I didn't want to sound crazy or that I'd lost myself, because I knew that if she thought something was up, she'd pull me out of this job quick. Hey Mum, you okay? Yeah, just tired. You okay, honey? Yeah, just wanted to see that you guys are okay. Is Dad okay? Yeah. You okay, honey? Yeah, Mum, yeah, I'm all good. Alright, good night. My mum clearly was extremely tired, and I knew that I didn't have the heart to tell her something was wrong, because, well, nothing was wrong. There was just something wrong with this screen, or myself. I sat back down and tried to play Candy Crush, but this thought was at the forefront of my mind, screaming for my attention. So I put my phone down and look up again. It's not there anymore. A sigh of relief washes over me as my eyes look over towards the other monitors, and that's when I just about crap another brick. Whatever it is now walking around the perimeter of the building. I see it by the dumpsters, and then lumber, slowly, moving around until it's by the fire exit. Now the fire exit has a small window that you can see through. I am bricking it. I know that if I tilt my head just at the right angle and look forward, I will be able to see the fire exit, which is situated just to the right of me. I take a deep breath, another deep breath, and slowly twist my head to the right and look at the fire exit. It's at that moment that I see whatever it is. It's a person wearing dark clothes, just standing there staring at me, head concealed by a hood. I swear, I could have had a heart attack with the fear, the darkness of the outside, and just staring in the dim light at this thing that was previously not visible at all. I pull my head back quickly and just stare at my phone, screen off, just waiting for something to happen. A few minutes later, paralyzed with fear, I see a car pull up at the gas station. They don't go for gas, but instead come in to grab a snack. It's a dude. He appears to be in his mid-40s. He grabs a few things and smacks them down in a rush on the counter. He looks down at me though, and in a moment, sort of seems placated and asks if everything's alright. The rush on his face seems to die away when he sees absolute terror in my eyes. Yeah, sorry, nothing's wrong, I'm fine. He gives me a quizzical look, but doesn't push any further, pays for the items and leaves. Just as he's pulling away, somehow, with the comfort of knowing there's someone at least nearby, I tilt my head again and look out the door. There's no one there. The camera reflects this. The person is gone. I wait, and they don't return. Thinking I'd seen the last of them, I happily just try and concentrate on doing some stock taking before my replacement comes in at 5 a.m. When Brenda arrives at 5 a.m., she and I have a small chat. She can tell that I'm visibly shaken and that something is wrong. Her first instinct is to ask if I'd been robbed or if someone had come in with a gun or something. I tell her no, nothing like that. And I don't really know how to describe it, but in the way she looked at me, it was as if she can tell something I couldn't quite explain had occurred. Then she gets a bright idea. Did you see the hoodie man? The hoodie man? I ask. Yeah, the hoodie man. Listen, John told me a story about how a few years back he was here in the dead of night when a guy in a dark hoodie showed up. He just started tapping on the window. John told him to go away, but when he wouldn't, he went out to confront him personally. As he went to open the door, the man went for the door too, and as he looked through the glass door about to open it, did he see that this man had no pupil whatsoever and just two dark eyes. He assumed the guy was tweaked out on something, who knows how many drugs to get that effect, or maybe contact lenses. But as you guessed, John locked up quick and didn't let anyone in for the next hour or so until the police came. When they came, they looked up and down the road but couldn't find anyone. And since then, a few people have said that they've seen him in the cameras, but he's never actually come in. I feel a sense of relief and horror at the same time, knowing I wasn't crazy, but knowing I wasn't crazy meant it must have been true. I wasn't entirely sure where I stood, and the fear enveloped me even harder. I tell her, yeah, I think I saw that, and said that I had to go, that my parents were waiting for me, and just drove home. I try not to think about what I saw, some phantom tweaker, or God knows what. This story happened to my dad. He is the most no-nonsense person I know, and works as a long-haul truck driver. This happened a few years back. He came back shaken from this one job he did, and when we asked about it, he didn't want to talk. It took him a few weeks before he actually revealed what it was that happened, for fear of sounding crazy. The following is his story, as how he told it to me. So, I was doing a normal job. I was getting quite tired and was getting up to my hours anyway. So I parked up and went in to the rest stop to have a sandwich and a bite to eat and use the restroom. I noticed that there were a bunch of lot lizards around this area too. Note, lot lizards are, shall we say, women of negotiable affection that generally hang around rest areas to try and lure truckers. So, there are a bunch of these ladies around the area. My dad, a very happily married man, had no interest in them whatsoever. He did his business, had some food, and went back to his truck so that he could take a nap. He had to have a few hours sleep until breakfast before he could even drive again. So he's trying to get to sleep, and scrolling through his phone right before he does just that, when he hears a knock on the window. This isn't the first time he's had to deal with lot lizards, so he just shouts to them to go away and that he's not interested. He'd already locked the door, he was sure of that. So, he turns off his phone and tries to get comfortable, but the tapping continues. "I said to go away," he shouts, this time with more force and aggression. And my dad is definitely the kind of person who, when aggression is required, it can come out in his voice and be very startling. But the tapping persists. This time he's getting angry. He goes over and looks down to see a small child. This took him back. He rolls down the window and asks if everything's all right, tone and mood changing completely. "Hello. Can you help me, please? I'm lost and want to find my mum." He recalls there being something almost robotic about the way the question was put. Not really human. He looks down at the child. They don't seem to be more than 9 or 10. Okay, sweetie. Where did you last see your mum? I think this is a job for the police." The child didn't seem fazed, but just replied, "I don't know, but I need to find them, please. Can I use your phone? Can you let me in?" Something was wrong with this situation. My dad could just tell. He was starting to get goosebumps and really didn't want to let this creepy little 10-year-old into his truck. How about I call the authorities, alright?" He goes to grab his phone, and when he comes right back, she's now standing on his rig, staring up at him, closer now, right by the open window. "Can you let me in, please?" My dad takes one look at her and jumps back. There are no pupils. Her eyes are completely black. He says he almost had a heart attack right there and then, and he's a big man, so I believe it when he says that could have happened. He just kind of stares at her in a panic. "Let me in, John. I need help." How the hell did she know his name? He wondered if perhaps it was written on a paper or something that was visible through the window. He just said, "I'm sorry, I can't help you. Ask the next truck." The child didn't persist, but was simply gone, almost like they'd vanished. He looked down to see if they were still there, but they were gone, almost like they had never been there at all. My dad closed his window and went back to try and get some rest, but he couldn't. He just stared up at the ceiling, eyes wide open, wondering what the hell happened, fear enveloping him. It was quite late. He desperately wanted to call my mum, just to have someone to talk to, but knew that she would be fast asleep. He stayed awake until around 6 a.m. when he finally called my mum, saying in his head that it was early enough for her to accept the call without getting pissed. He didn't tell her what happened, but just wanted someone to talk to. He didn't even want to step outside. Only in the daylight, when he saw other people walking around the place, did he finally get the courage to go outside. It really affected him. He will now never answer anyone tapping or knocking on the window, not verbally or at all, and just pretend like he's not there. It really shook him. I still wonder what the hell it was that he saw that night. My mum says it might have been an alien, but I don't know. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. I do hope that you enjoyed tonight's Black-Eyed Kid stories. It took a hell of a long time to actually find these stories. Thank you to all of those of you who submitted your encounters. They were definitely creepy to read. And if you have a story that you would like narrated on the channel, all that you have to do is submit it to my email or my Reddit page. Links to both can be found in the description. I'd like to extend a huge thank you to my members and my patrons whose help is invaluable and help keep the channel running. Those names are on screen, and if you would like your name on screen and also get a sticker pack of vinyl stickers, some paper stickers, a letter from me in the post, and all the exclusive perks you get for joining Patreon, you can do just that by following the link at the top of the description too. Thank you all so much for listening. If you enjoyed, don't forget to drop a like and leave a comment. I love reading them, and it goes a hell of a long way in pleasing the ever so pesky YouTube algorithm. But let's wrap things up here. More stories can be found on screen, and until then, I'll see you Saturday night. Stay awesome, stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.